Thanks so much for listening to In Studio. I'm your host, Jay Daniels, and this has been a wonderful season in the world of jazz and pop music. And let's face it, we've seen so many wonderful releases being put out by the record labels, songs that you know and love so very well, songs that may be new to you. And then there are those albums that are quite unique, and I think we've stumbled upon that one from a well-beloved vocalist and friend of Simply Timeless. Her name is Cyrille Aimée, and she has just released the album Move On, a Sondheim adventure from Mack Avenue. And Cyrille, I know that you have a very busy schedule these days, but thanks so much for taking the time to stop by and say hello.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Now, as we've said, the name of your latest release is Move On, a Sondheim adventure. Pays tribute to the music of Stephen Sondheim, and we're going to talk about his work in just a moment, but as a play on the album title, your life up to this point has truly been an adventure in itself that has kept you moving. And like many in this industry, music was an integral part of your life growing up, and you grew up on the outskirts of Paris, France, and tell us about some of those early musical influences that you had growing up.
I guess, first of all, my mother is from Dominican Republic, and so for me, music started as a way to express yourself physically through dance, and it's still the case. For me, music and dancing is just one and the same, and so there was always salsa, merengue, bachata, Latin music in the house, as well as Michael Jackson and a lot of kinds of music, flamenco music and country music, because my parents, they're not musicians, but they love to dance. And so that was my first influence was my parents. And then growing up in this little village in France, which is the village where Django Reinhardt used to live, that had a big influence on me as well, because Django was a gypsy, and so there's a Django Reinhardt festival in his honor every year in my village, and gypsies from all across Europe come in caravans and set camp in the fields to honor him. And so when I was a little girl, I became friends with the gypsies, and that's how I started singing. When I first met the gypsies, I was around 14 years old, and I was really just fascinated by their way of life. I had heard the music for years already, but I didn't really care about their music. I just fell in love with their culture, and for a 14-year-old girl to meet a bunch of kids her age who don't go to school, it's pretty fascinating.
Sure.
You don't go to school? Oh my God, you're so lucky. And and so I became friends with them and really fascinated with the way they lived. And by discovering the way they lived, I discovered their music, which is completely associated to the way they see life, which is, the gypsies really live in the moment. They don't know where they'll be a week from now. They don't know what it means to save money or to plan ahead. And their music is like that. It's very in the present moment kind of music, very spontaneous, very improvised. And so when I fell in love with this music and I first started to play some guitar, I was really friends with a gypsy that was teaching me to play guitar, and in exchange I was teaching him to read. And one day his big brother, who was kind of the virtuoso in the family, asked me to sing a song. And so I sang the song, and when I saw the smile on everyone's faces and the connection that was so much more direct than when I had the guitar in my hand, I realized that's what I wanted to do. And so then I looked through all the Django records that I knew to see if there were any other songs that had lyrics to. The song he had asked me to sing was Sweet Sue. And I found a few. I found After You've Gone, Georgia on My Mind, but there were not a lot of vocal songs. So someone gave me a 4-CD box set of Ella Fitzgerald, and I completely fell in love with the American songbook. And so that's what made me want to come to America to learn the American songbook.
Was it difficult having to leave the life that you knew and leave your family, leaving all of that to go in search of this musical dream of yours?
I've ever since I was a baby, I've been packing up and leaving. My parents are kind of have a gypsy lifestyle. I was born in France, but 2 weeks later we moved to Africa in Cameroon. Was living there for 3 years, then Mexico, and by the time I was 20, I had lived in 4 continents, and so packing up and leaving is really not a hard thing for me. It's very exciting, actually.
And let me ask you, if you hadn't decided to go in a direction of music for your career, is there something else that you might have done?
Well, you know what? At some point when I was a teenager and I was just discovering jazz, I was also discovering, in France, a lot of people grow up skiing. And when I was a teenager, I discovered snowboarding. And at some point, I wanted to be a professional snowboarder.
Did anything ever happen with that?
No, I went with music, and I don't regret it.
Well, we're glad that you went in that direction. And I will tell you that, you know, I recently found your music about a year or two ago. I was introduced to it. When I listened to your recordings, especially your live album that you did, I think it was released last year, a live recording from Le Bassin Rouge in New York. There were several great tunes. You included It's a Good Day, Live Alone and Like It, another one by Stephen Sondheim. Si tu vois ma mère, I believe is how you pronounce it, from Sidney Bechet. There was one track out of all of those that stuck out for me, and I think we're talking about your early influences, how you came to love music. I think all of those more or less came together in a recording you did for that live album. It was of Michael Jackson's Wanna Be Starting Something.
Oh,
and
yeah,
it was
looper.
Totally a cappella.
Yeah.
What are your inspirations for your musical sound? Because that is all you as far as what we heard on that album. How do those inspirations come together to form what you would call your sound?
Well, you know, it's an endless, I'm still getting a lot of inspiration today, you know, especially with my fresh moves to New Orleans. But I guess it's specifically for the looping and the overdubbing my voice and doing all a cappella stuff, one of my biggest influences is Bobby McFerrin, as it is for a lot of singers. And when I was in college, I remember dreaming about a machine that could do that could just start, you know, that I could record the bass line and the percussion so that I wouldn't need anyone to kind of to write songs, to play around, to have fun with. And one day I saw a guitar player using a machine like that, and I asked him what it was, and when he said it was a loop station, I immediately went to the store and got one and started using it for the voice.
And I remember when I heard it on the album, I thought, never in a million years did I think that I would hear this in a jazz album, and it was beautifully done.
Someone's always trying, got my favorite crying, talking, stealing, lying. You just want to be starting something. You want to be starting something. You got to be starting something. I said you want to be starting something. You got to be starting something.
It's hard to put certain songs into a box, and I think a lot of times, if we're honest about it, we hear a song and we try to say, well, this person, they sound like this artist, or this is where they're drawing their inspiration, or this is a jazz song, this is an R&B song. And yet, what you have done then, what you are doing now, you are able to take experiences and inspirations from various genres and really create a fusion that is remarkable.
Thank you. That's really the nicest compliment. That's the nicest compliment, you know, because as artists, what we try to do is to break the boundaries of the boxes that we're put in. You know, we don't like putting words to art. It's difficult. You know, this is jazz, this is soul, this is art.
Yeah.
And for me, jazz is not a style of music. It's a way to play any kind of music, you know, freely.
That's more or less what you've done with your latest album, Move On, A Sondheim Adventure. You wouldn't typically think of a tribute album to Stephen Sondheim being released as a jazz album, and yet that's what you've done, and done it very well. From what I gather, you were not familiar with the music of Sondheim until just a few short years ago. Tell us about how you came to know not only his music, but also the composer himself.
Yeah, well, actually, that's one of the reasons that I recorded this album in France. Because growing up in France, since Sondheim is such a lyric-based repertoire, no one really knows him over there because we don't understand the words. And I discovered him because a few years ago I got selected to be part of this New York City Center Encore special, which was a tribute to Stephen Sondheim, played by the Wynton Marsalis Orchestra. And the two female singers were myself and Bernadette Peters.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can imagine, as an introduction to Stephen Sondheim's music, I don't think there's a better way.
Sure.
And so I completely fell in love with the music. And one of the songs that I was singing on the show is the first song that I ever arranged and covered of him, which is Live Alone and Like It, the one you mentioned from the live album.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I met him because during that run of shows, he knocked on my dressing room door and told me that I made him laugh and cry. and it was very touching. And so after that run was about 2 weeks. It's a thing they do once a year, a different show every year, the New York City Center. After that show, I started digging deeper into his repertoire, trying to hear all of this repertoire that I had that was totally unknown to me. And I realized there were so many songs that were songs that I would love to sing.
Ever since I can remember, I've had a secret dream in my heart, looking forward to the day I could start my climb up the path to the stars of acclaim, applause, and fame.
We're speaking with vocalist Cyrille Aimée, who has just released a wonderful album from Mack Avenue Records called Move On, a Sondheim adventure. And you actually helped lead into my next question. And that is, with this album, each of the songs has a particular story, a message, whether it's directly related to the show that it comes from or just the inherent lyrics that come within the song itself. You have songs like When I Get Famous from Climb High, and then a wonderful tune that is possibly my own favorite from the album, No One Is Alone from Into the Woods. There are only 14 tracks on this particular album, and not all of them were familiar to me. There were a lot that I had to learn too. But you mentioned in the press release, and I think this applies also to the other albums that I've heard from you, these songs tell a story, but also you picked them, from what I'm reading, you picked the songs because they've also spoken to you. Tell us about what your thought process was into picking some of these songs.
So it kind of went in two steps. The first thing I did was I bought the 4-volume books of Sondheim's music, and I just read it. Like, to me, I just read it like a book, and each song was like a short story. It was incredible. It was really a beautiful read, and there's not a lot of music books that you can do that with, but I did, and I just read through everything, and with each song that I felt compelled to, that I felt attracted to, and that I could relate to, that I liked the lyrics to, I put a little asterisk. And then I had about 40 or something songs. Then I went online and looked up those songs to hear a version of them because I don't read music, so I had to go and check them out online. And and then I did another selection of with a little asterisk in front of the ones that I like the music to as well. And that's how I compiled my 14 songs. Then when I closed the chapter with my previous band, I moved to New Orleans. I was in a new city, and everything was really kind of scary in a way. Everything new, no more band. And so that's when I started to work on this album. And as I was working on each song, kind of really learning it and getting really deep with the lyrics and trying to figure out what I was going to do with the song, the deeper I got into each song, the more I felt the connection to my personal life and what I was going through at that moment. Because apart from, saying goodbye to my band that I had been touring with for 5 years and saying goodbye to New York City, which I was living in for 10 years, a lot of other things were happening in my life that were very difficult, and working on these songs completely saved me. They were speaking to me and they were telling my story. And so then I decided to put them in the order of the story that I was going through while I was working on this record. And so the whole record is my story from beginning to end during that period.
Take heart, my friend, I believe in you. I've bought the trend, I believe in you. Some say I'm blind or I'm out of my mind. They'd be startled to find every word is true.
That's a wonderful thing. And I think that the more that I've been involved with music and the more you've been involved with the music over the years, I think we both realize that for wherever we are in life, no matter if it's a good day, if it's a bad day, everything in between, I think we realize that, there are songs that speak to just about any situation in life. And that's the picture that you've painted here on this album. As an artist releasing your work to the people, would you also hope that it would be able to speak to them wherever they might be in life?
Of course. And that's why, when I started working on the record, I purposely didn't go and check out where the songs were coming from, what show, what was the story, who was the character singing them. I didn't know anything about the context. I wanted to take these songs out of context and make them into a more personable version so that it could reach, first of all, me, of course, make them my own, put my own emotion in it, but so that it could also touch people that have no idea of what this song is supposed to be about. And I actually told Stephen Sondheim that. I told him I didn't know anything about the songs when I wrote these arrangements, and then now of course I know everything. Since the record's been recorded, I went and checked out every single show, and it's beautiful. But I think it's kind of like a lot of jazz standards that we play come from musical theater, come from Broadway. And in the jazz world, even, Sondheim is not really famous. People don't play his music, but it's so rich in harmony and intricate melodies. And there's just so much to work with.
You are in your mid-30s, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
You are of a generation that really did not grow up with a lot of this music. It was before your time, and it was before my time. Would you say that in introducing these songs to an audience that you're also introducing them to a new, younger audience who has never had that experience before?
I hope so. That's also one of the reasons that I fell in love with Stephen Sondheim's lyrics, because, after having sung the American songbook for a while, and I know a lot of tunes, I know a lot of standards, after a while the lyrics kind of seem redundant and very old-fashioned. very.
Yeah.
And what I love about Sondheim lyrics is that they're so contemporary, so modern, so young, so full of life. They can really talk to the younger audience more than the American songbook, the jazz standards. And I think it's a good way to get into jazz without feeling like you're listening to old timer music.
I love how you put that. Sure. I listen to your recordings, and there's a very fresh sound. Again, you did not grow up in America with this music. A lot of these are very new for you, having to learn them as an artist. And yet when I hear your recordings, whether they are live or in studio, there's a genuine sound that really comes, I think, from deep in the heart. That's where I think a lot of this comes from. You can hear it not only in the arrangements, but also in your vocal stylings when you sing about it. I still remember when I first heard the live album, and I said, this is someone who is clearly doing it from the heart. And you have gained the respect of so many in the jazz industry in a relatively short time. In fact, a lot of people consider you one of the more popular vocalists touring the scene these days. But in your opinion, in this world of jazz music, where do you see yourself as far as your role in the grand scheme of things?
Well, I guess we talked about it a little bit, trying to get a younger audience interested in this kind of music. That is definitely one of my goals. I love teaching. I do a lot of master classes, and that's one of my favorite things to do. Is as much as singing, I love teaching. And so I think one of my roles is to, like you said, when I sing, I do sing from the heart, and my motto is the present moment, to be in the present moment, and that's how I am when I perform. That's how I live my music. That's how I fell in love with music when I met the Gypsies, and that's the only way I can imagine myself making music, is basically being open to what's happening in the moment and not trying to recreate what happened yesterday or something like that. And I think this is something that needs to be applied not just in music, but in life in general. In life, we have trouble living in the moment, especially nowadays, and especially the younger generations, who are always connected on their phones and the social media, and it's very difficult to just take a moment and breathe. And if I can bring that through my music and for a moment make people realize what are the important things and be present, then I'm doing the right thing. That's what I felt when the first time I sang and I saw everyone smile. That's what I realized. That's what I wanted to do forever.
Mother cannot guide you. Now you're on your own. Only me beside you. Still, you're not alone. No one is alone.
Vocalist Cyrille Aimée is our guest in studio here from Simply Timeless. The album is called Move On, a Sondheim adventure, and you actually have a number of tour dates coming up, and I believe you're coming to New York in the next few weeks. Is that right?
Yes, I am. I'm coming. I'm very excited. I'm coming to Birdland Jazz Club for a week to perform the music from the CD and basically celebrate the release of the record. The record's coming out February 22nd, and we're starting our week at Birdland on the 26th.
Well, I am looking forward to that. I will be at one of those concerts. I haven't figured out which one.
Nice.
But I know a lot of folks are excited about it, and I told a few folks that I was talking with you, and the response was very positive. So we appreciate what you do in preserving and promoting this wonderful art form that we call jazz music, and especially for your heart and sharing that through your album. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for spreading the music.
Cyrille Aimée, our guest here on In Studio, and we'll look forward to seeing her at Birdland. And if you're not in New York, there are several other tour dates coming up, and you can find those on her Facebook page and also other media on the web by searching for Cyrille Aimée. I'm Jay Daniels, encouraging you to depart in peace, remember the poor, pray for the sick, and love one another. We'll see you on the radio next time.